stop doing the minimalist DM kit wrong. I watched a lot of travel mini DM kit videos for a trip we were doing and I have an opinion on it. And I've decided to design a DM kit based on this personal DMing philosophy. So what's D&D, Dungeons and Dragons? And I mean this in a more broad, philosophical? The millennium. What the heck is wrong with me? So what is Dungeons and Dragons? And I mean this in a broad sense, right? And in a very large sense, we're acting out a story in our minds. The mechanics around D&D are an abstraction of things in the physical world. Our character sheet is how we represent a fictional character and give them weight. Ultimately, you and I don't need more than a sheet of paper and a pencil to play D&D. I don't even need to mention dice because, well, we all have phones and they can actually roll dice for us. Now I should say all the extra stuff around D&D helps. We want to close the distance between these abstractions, these ideas, and the physical world to make playing it feel more real and help other people who can't imagine as well. Basically, the tabletop helps you act out on this medium, right? And you close the gap with it. This is all great in a really philosophy sense, but listen, Mr. Art Degree, I just clicked on this video to get a bunch of RPG tchotchkes that I can never use. And don't worry, you'll get there, but that's the point. You were never going to use those tchotchkes anyway, so what do you really need? I watched a lot of DM kit videos that had a lot of stuff in them, and what I would argue as a DM is that you can do more with less, as long as you bring the right kind of mentality to the table as a DM and are comfortable setting up the scene with your words. So we'll talk about how to develop and set a scene in detail later, but what can we bring to the physical to help close the gap and still allow for that flexibility that the theater of the mind provides? And my answer to that question is cards. I've linked all of these below. Some of it might be affiliate links, but the idea is the same behind this. I also put them in a pill, but we'll come back to where they go later. The cards I have are from ICRPG, but you can use cards from anywhere. I'm running 2 sessions right now with the majority new players, and if you don't use something, you lose it. In this case, imagination. We're all born with it, society stifles it. So a fear often told to me by my older players is that I'm worried I won't get into it. I need visuals or I can't see it. I had one say, I don't know how to imagine things. Well, statistically speaking, you speak more to yourself than anybody else, and I, as a GM, need to get you to use that self-talk-to brain to paint a picture instead. And it can do that, especially if you're talking to yourself. This is why visual aids are actually really important, right? But you don't need a Chessex grid. They're nice and more visually, generally better, right? But the idea here is to try and test out the bare minimum and then add on if you need it. Now, these cards are pretty basic. It's a visual aid, and that's really the name of the game here for this DM kit. And these cards, in my opinion, work as a one-stop shop. These cards right here are the Essentials deck, right? Which basically means that it's almost all terrain and various other different creeks, taverns, places, churches, traps, items, you name it. Basically, the deck has all you'll need to make a quick visual when describing something to your player. Generally, this deck skews fantasy, but it does include sci-fi and Western themes for those of you bitten by a Haunted West bug. Really, the cards are super versatile in this deck and useful for all sorts of scenarios. Will it have everything? No, but it will have a lot more than what you could possibly need. The idea behind the deck is to introduce some visual theatrics. Assuming you're using cards and you're playing in person, you could definitely use these to emphasize certain points by placing a card down. The idea is to be theatrical and be confident, but I understand not all DMs are that kind of person. But just generally, it does work as a visual aid. In my opinion, this deck in particular is an absolute necessity if you're going to be building my version of a minimalist DM kit. Really, the fact that they're kind of generalist means that you can use them in a variety of situations. But again, this is all going to require you to actually put in some ideas of your own here. I just see a lot of cards sold for D&D with specific intentions in mind rather than general conceptual ideas. And the idea is to take the general things and then use them in more specific way. The next deck is also pretty self-explanatory. It's a monsters deck, so you get a variety of creatures in here, some fantasy, some not fantasy. Generally, it's going to be specifically a visual aid, but again, I like throwing one down to signify a combat encounter, or, you know, just improving something with an NPC, using this as a visual to kind of buffet me or give me a second to come up with something in my mind. There isn't much to say about a deck like this. It's simplicity, and I tend to like things more minimalist and simplistic. These two decks, I guarantee, are pretty much the bare minimum minimalist idea here. The next deck is kind of like a more of it's nice to have kind of thing, but I definitely won't say it would be a requirement for this kind of setup. Again, it's ICRPG themed, but I like the style, right? This next deck is called the Idea Deck. Hankerin has a video on how to use it, but I use it in place of a standard deck of cards. This deck comes with fun little motifs to signify certain things. It's very versatile, but it's one of those things you're going to have to build a system around to use. You can use these cards to generate encounters, traps, NPCs, or you can use them as suits and cards to signify buffs or debuffs, stat effects, or story ideas. And I get, what is wrong with me? Why can't I speak today? The Idea Deck is super versatile. You can use it to generate encounters, traps, NPCs. You can use the suits to signify buffs or debuffs, status effects, story ideas. The deck also comes with common DV numbers for ICRPG, but that's a more mechanical specific thing for that game, and you don't necessarily need to use it for that specifically. Really, this is just a deck that allows you to have more possibilities and more utilities, and I do like having some multi-use utility in my decks. And I mean, you could use a standard deck of 52 here and just watch Hankerin's video to get an idea of how he uses these kind of things. I guess get a deck of 52 if you want to play like War or Goldfish. Now, I ain't gonna lie, it is actually very difficult to like fold and do all these things with these cards while also talking and reading a script off the camera. So if you like MPT and the videos I put out here, make sure to subscribe, or maybe check out our coffee that I have linked down below. We ship everything ourselves. It's biodegradable, fair trade, and USDA organic. So I put a lot of effort into making sure that this coffee is beautiful and amazing and an enjoyable experience for you, the gamer. So where do I store all these things? Well, I store them in this. I'm calling it the pill. It's actually a tech kit, but I've found nerd products or D&D nerd themed products. Those things are kind of lacking in material quality and functionality. And like, I went online and I saw DM backpacks for sale to allow you to carry the most maximum amount of things. And honestly, at that rate, just use a normal bag. You know, get like a shelved bag at the very least, or something with like compartments, right? But don't get like a D&D nerd bag, because it's just bad quality bag and you're gonna be stuck with a bag for like 10 years. Don't get it. So if you're gonna get a bag and you want to carry around a bag at a convention because you run games, get something nice, like a Peak Design bag, something that's gonna last you years and isn't like an ugly eyesore. Anyway, this thing that I got here is it holds a lot. In fact, it holds a dice tray. There's room for pens in here, which you're gonna need because I do have another item that doesn't go in this for this kit. It does get tight, but yes, you can fit every single one of the decks I mentioned in here, and an extra deck. You can fit an extra deck in this thing as well. It expands because of this like meshy pocket thing. So not only do you get a dice tray, dice, your cards, some pens, I also recommend packing some notebooks. And yeah, I did go and spend the extra money to get the field notes stuff, but there's a reason for that. I've actually filled some of these pages with rules and all that jazz. And this is the notebook I haven't filled out. But I do have a notebook in a bag somewhere filled out with things. And we can go over how I use these in another video. But it is very useful. I use it to hold quest hooks, story ideas, all that kind of stuff, right? So if you're going to be carrying all this, what do you carry it in? Because I did poo-poo over all the DM bags you can buy on like Amazon. So what are we exactly looking for here? So let's talk a little technical. When we go out looking for bags, we need to understand exactly what we're looking for, right? I mentioned that Peak Design bag earlier. That's a 400D nylon canvas. This thing is like waterproof overkill, and I don't think most people will need that for a convention. I do use that bag every day. It's my daily driver. The feel is really nice, but it could be heavy for someone, and I use it to protect my tech because I don't usually just carry a DM kit. I'm usually carrying around a camera or something like that. In fact, if I was recommending a nice bag to the fellow gamer out there, I'd recommend this, the Air Flight Pack. It's an X-Pack version of the bag. Without getting technical with this is a lightweight as heck, and it's traditionally used with racing sailcloth, so it doesn't rip like a polyester type deal. It's super light, and the Air was my daily driver for about 2 years. Mainly for its front pocket, which is basically like a gigantic pencil case. If I was not a camera person, this would be my bag for conventions, and yes, it would carry my Minimalist DM kit. And also, yes, the water bottle pocket could technically fit a Chessex grid if you were going to carry one. This DM kit is really a test in how minimalist can you make D&D, and I do think you can play a game of D&D with everything I have laid out on this table. Will it require prep in advance? Probably, but are you running the most complicated one-shot at a convention where you've never met individuals? Why did I lay it out like that? What am I doing? Make a nice spread. Now, DM kits, I think, should change depending on the scenario. People tend to build just one in their videos, but I think depending on what kind of DMing you do or what kind of scenario you're going to be running games in, you should change it based on what you need. Maybe if you're traveling to work with kids and they've never played D&D before, bring some cheap dollar store dice with you and then give those out as gifts for the new budding gamers. If you're going to work with the disabled or something like that, you'd bring different, maybe more high visual materials, so that way those hard of seeing can see more easily. I know these cards, for some, might be a little hard to determine detail. If you're going somewhere with a lot of people, maybe pack a bigger dice tray and look around for nice materials on that as well, because, you know, we want to look for things that are nice and gonna last us a long time. The idea is to be flexible and to build a base that you can change and add on to into future depending on what your gaming needs are. I think a lot of DM kits look to solve one specific problem, when in reality we should be recommending people a base of which they can put their personality into. And you don't need to use these specific things, but if you do, make sure to tell them that you subscribe to Mana Potion Tabletop and hit the bell.